Welcome, people.
Welcome.
We are as excited as ever to have you here again this month. And I can say for Doug, well, we just did say welcome, so I guess I don't need to say that again, do I?
No, I said welcome. I jumped in before I let you say it for me.
Thank you, Doug. It's good for you to. You got to keep me on track here. Let's start
Very
off with
true.
Let's start off with our announcements. This is something that I should have said last month, but this is our, at least for you and I, and reinvigorating the podcast and being as going every month. This is the halfway mark for the year. It was, well, at least on the June podcast. So I thought that was, a nice accomplishment for you and I.
I think it's very exciting.
It's exciting. People are emailing us questions. They're leaving us feedback on iTunes, which both Doug and I very much appreciate. And I think generally this podcast is turning out pretty well.
I think so, and can only get better.
Yeah, in spite of our commentary, it's turning out well.
Yes.
Well, that's our announcement. Let's get right into some science news. This is one of our new features, and we like to highlight an article or two that we see that's in the news. And this month, if you look at the link, this is reported in the USA Today, and the headline is, New Science of Learning Could Reinvent Teaching Techniques. This article came from Science. Science is a very respected journal. And basically, if you read this over, it's not so much of a study, but it's someone who, an author, his name's Andrew Meltzoff, I think is how you pronounce his name. He's from the University of Washington, and he's saying we have this convergence of these other types of other things that we know about learning, and if people can embrace this convergence, then this new science of learning would just reinvent education with new types of educational techniques. And the convergence would be, let me see if I remember, I think one of it is neuroscience, right?
And neuroscience, actually I have it here.
Okay.
I was neuroscience, psychology, machine learning, and education.
Right. And those in the information from each one of those helps provide this new science of learning. I thought that this article was interesting, and people who probably aren't really familiar with education and how things are done might be like, wow, there's all these new things in psychology, all these new things in neuroscience. We're studying machines and robots, and education has some things to contribute, and if we just put this all in a blender and turn it on, we're going to have this new science of learning, and that's how we should do things. And it's interesting, but I don't know. I had a few reservations about this. What were some of your thoughts?
Well, I think you said it well in that these fields are looking at things maybe at face value from a similar. Again, maybe it comes out looking very similar, but I think they're looking at things very differently. And the review did a good job of saying, all right, well, then we have some of these things here, we have some of these things here. What can we do to kind of mesh it all together? And I don't know if everything meshes together as perfectly as they would like, but obviously they're not saying this is the way the world is going to be. This is just a suggestion. And
yes.
I think with the state of affairs in the nation, you have education as usual is a hot topic. So there's this new thing, and I don't know if I can speak for everybody, but I've noticed that people like new things, and so they jump right on it, and they just kind of take it for face value as, oh, this is going to do this is going to do that. And so I just think it's a lot of buzz because it's a new way of looking at it, but I don't know if it says anything necessarily new. Or maybe that was my take.
Yeah. This article, you and I both actually read the source material, And
Right.
we had a chance to read the article, and certainly what this article does is it talks about these fields and highlights some of the very important pieces from these fields. And I don't know, I almost think that if you're a scientist and you read widely in your field and whatever you're interested in, you might actually get some of this information. Some of it might not. For example, the machine learning and the stuff that they do with robotics, and maybe some of the more high-end neuroscience. But oftentimes, psychology and education, I think a lot of that research tends to already blend itself together, or you see a lot of overlap.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think there's overlap, and maybe some of the methods are a little different, terminology may be different, but if you look at some of those end results, they kind of look similar, and I could see researchers on both sides of the fence, or maybe not necessarily a fence, but on both sides, looking at for ideas from those other disciplines.
Mm-hmm. I like the fact that they're talking about this is a science. I like the author in that I think what the author's trying to do is something good. Anyone who is trying to better education and say, hey, look, let's get together, let's have these fields have something unique to offer, which maybe some of these other fields aren't looking at. I think that's always good. One thing that I didn't like that he said was had to take a shot at Skinner. I don't understand why that always seems to happen, but it's almost like, okay, we need a foil, we need a bad guy, so let's trot out Skinner again. And there's a line in here where they're saying this is, they're talking about statistical regularities and information, and they're talking about these new machine programs where they say that they succeed without direct reinforcement or supervision, and they're saying this is an alternate to Skinnerian reinforcement learning. An alternate to Skinnerian reinforcement learning. Isn't that a little bit redundant there?
Yeah, and I guess you can almost say an old adage is the enemy of my enemy, my friend. So if you think about, if you can, that's why maybe we're holding this one up, because he is such a polarizing figure for some people, and so he can be used in that way. But I thought the statement in there that probably was very interesting. It was almost, well, we know that the best way is one-on-one teaching, but we need to think of these other ways.
Yeah.
So I just in the article, I just wanted to throw that in. I noticed that the author specifically noted that, well, the best way of education is one-on-one teaching. That I was just thinking on how most PT is done, but okay.
Yeah. When I read this, I certainly my background and yours too covers behavior analysis and precision teaching, and we think similarly. And one thing that always bothers me is people take an indirect route to learning. Later in the article, they talk about different areas where progress is being made, and if you talk like the brain imaging stuff. So a kid's brain lights up, and when you do something, that gives you some information. But our science and the way we look at the world, we look at measuring behavior directly. We look at measuring behavior continuously. And that gives us such direct feedback and so much rich information that I'm always disappointed when I read an article like this, which is exciting on the one hand, saying, hey, we have all these interesting things, but on the other hand saying, well, the Skinnerian stuff, don't worry about that. When we have all of this, and they don't say precision teaching because obviously that's not as big as Skinner, but to disregard that or somehow look down upon that just doesn't do anybody any good, if you ask me.
And I think one of the worst things is to think that Skinner or one-on-one teaching is simplistic, and that is so. I don't even like that part. just thinking that, oh, it's just so simple to do it that way. And it's almost, we got to find a more difficult way to do this because, well, humans aren't that simple.
No. Behaviors.
Well,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was just going to say it had some really good things, as you mentioned, and it had some, I guess, maybe frustrating things as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where this goes, where this takes off. I'm not sure exactly how all of psychology even feels about neuroscience, because it could be, neuroscience could actually become the new psychology if you think about it. The more technical and the better neuroscience gets at, they could probably maybe even overturn some of these things that people in psychology are saying. But that's another story for another day. But this is an interesting article to read, and even checking out what they say about learning, how learning is computational, social, and these other things driven by brain circuitry. It's interesting reading this article and seeing the play that it's getting.
Well, we'll see.
We will see. But let's move on, and we have an email question today. This email comes from a Sarah, no last name given, and I think Sarah might be from the list. I'm not sure. But her question is, what is the difference between learning channels and learning styles? Very good question, Sarah. What is the difference between learning channels and learning styles? They both have the same word, right? Learning. But we're talking about learning channels and learning styles. What do you think about that, Doug? I'm going to let you have the first crack at this question.
Oh, the first crack. Well, maybe we should define them both first.
Good.
Yeah, or maybe, talk about each one individually and then how they are different. Learning styles. If I almost want to use examples.
Go ahead.
Learning styles when I see learning styles, I think more of some people feel that children learn better based on their quote unquote learning styles. And those learning styles can include such as auditory learning or visual learning or, I guess, tactile or touching things, manipulating things. And so the idea is if we can identify a student's learning style, we can provide the appropriate stimuli and teach them based on that, and they can make better learning gains. And so add to that, take learning channels. I'll turn it back to you to do the other one, and then we'll talk about the differences.
So defining learning channels, you're saying?
Yeah, or add, if you want to add the learning styles, that's up to you. When I see that, I think we need to discover how they best learn and then present the material in such a fashion as to get at that way. So if they listen better, if they learn through seeing, if they learn through manipulating. So that was the way I would see learning styles.
Yeah, I think your examples were good, and just to say what you're saying, if we talk about learning styles, basically it's a theory, and the theory is saying, hey, everyone's different, people learn differently, and if you can figure out the preferred way or the preferred style people learn, then you're going to be able to teach them better. And your examples are right on the money. When we talk about learning channels in precision teaching, this was a way of capturing some of the terminology is inputs and outputs. So the stimuli that as biological creatures, we have sensory organs, and when we learn things, how is that information coming in, so to speak, or how are we how as creatures are we biological creatures? How are we taking that information in? Is it olfactory, smell? Is it hear, auditory? Is it visual, and so on? And when we are learning, and yeah, I'm not going to go into there. I'm going to just try to keep this plain English. I was going to go within, stimulus control and talk about this behavior,
Right.
but I'm going to stick to plain English here. When we respond, when we're learning something, we have outputs, and there are different ways of responding. I might type something. I might write something. I might say something. And there's a learning channel matrix which helps teachers figure out what are the learning channels and that we're using. You might use different learning channels. So an example of what would be called a learning channel set would be if I see something and I say something. If I'm learning that way, that would be a see, say, whatever it is. See, say, letter sounds. But letter sounds don't necessarily have to be see, say. Maybe they could be see, write. However.
Point.
Pardon me.
See point. See touch.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, exactly. So there we have learning styles, which is people generally look at those in three ways. They look at you're a visual learner, you're an auditory learner, or you are a kinesthetic learner. And those would be your preferred modalities of learning. And if we could figure it out, you're going to learn better. Whereas learning channels are purely descriptive strategy of defining how you're learning.
It also lets you cue in on weaknesses that the student has for the different output channels. So they may be able to see say, but they may not be able to see write. And so you'll be able to find that out if you look at that matrix and determine where their weaknesses and where their strengths are. And you can have the student practice the same skill, the same input through different outputs, and then the student has an opportunity to generalize the learning to the different ways of the different ways to identify like letter sounds, so you can go across that spectrum of outputs.
Yes, that's one strategy, or that's one way you could use the learning channel matrix. In fact, you could use learning channels for you could use it in, I would say, assessment, diagnosis, figuring out what's wrong. You could use it prognostically, if that's even a word. Prognosis is what I meant to say, I guess, prognostically. Where you are helping, making different plans. One of the things that I've been doing, which is actually what you're just describing, and I really need to get this in a nice article. I need to research it and share this because it's been working very well. So this is educational right now. It's not research proven, so to speak, but I'm going to share it anyways because I've been pretty successful with this. You can yoke channels. When you yoke channels, that means either with an input or an output, you are yoking channels together. And there are a number of students that I've been working with, and what we do is, let's say you want them to go, and this always blows my mind when you see this. Learning something in C-Say doesn't mean necessarily you're going to get C-Write.
Right.
It's, when you think about it, they're so closely related. Some kids, that can happen to them, but other kids, that's not going to happen. So just because someone learns something in one learning channel doesn't mean they can do it in all learning channels.
Right.
And what I've been doing is, if you want the kids to move to a particular learning channel, and again, this isn't something I think I invented. I'm sure other people are doing it, but it's always interesting when you see something that's working really well. You find out what the student's strongest learning channel is, and then you yoke that weaker channel, and you would, son of a bitch. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
All right. Let me see what was I saying.
You were saying about yoking the weaker to the stronger channel.
Okay, let me see if I can remember where I'm going here with my talk. One of the things that I've been looking at is taking that weaker channel and yoke it with the stronger channel, and then after the student is doing it well, then you can take out that weaker channel, and it's like a 3-step process. I should say I omitted the first step. The first step is you take the strong learning channel, and if it's something you want them to learn, you make sure that whatever it is, they got it. So if you want see here, whatever that particular thing you're teaching, you get them to a fluent level with see here. Then the second step is you yoke it with that weaker channel, so maybe it's see, hear, say, and the person hears and says it, and then you just go to see, say, or something like that.
Do you want to cover any more of the differences between the two? Because one is a very practical and one is very theoretical. Yeah, I guess is maybe the final statement on that. So, and
okay. Yeah, good point, Doug. You know what? Now that you're saying that, there's another big difference, which you may say, where I think you're going with this.
There's while learning styles are very theoretical, I think it's safe to say that there's not a lot of research to support that there are different learning styles in children.
Yes.
And there are, so it's sort of remained at that theoretical level. And learning channels, it happens all the time as well. You're seeing it, but the different learning channels happen in teaching and happen with your research that you're doing with yoking. So I don't know if I could say that there's research behind it. It's just, it's there. I mean, it's apparent different ways.
It's the difference between, when you talk about learning styles, actually the research out there shows, for example, with reading, if you try to match up a student's learning style, and I'm using air quotes here, with reading, that research shows that, hey, we can't really, there's not evidence for learning styles. That's the bottom line. But learning channels, we don't need evidence for learning channels because all it is describing learning.
Right.
Now, these other things that you and I are talking about, like this is how we're using learning channels, that's something different. We would have to have research to say, hey, if you do, let's just say we call it channel yoking. For us to go out and say to people, hey, if you do channel yoking, that's a research-based procedure. No, we can't say that because we don't have that type of evidence. But certainly, as far as learning channels, they're just there. It's just like saying, hey, this kid is doing say. You can't argue with that because that's what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm glad you
that's all. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of bring some closure to that because we got off talking. And by the way, that was very interesting, your channel yoking.
Thank you, Doug. It's always good to have a stroke.
There you go.
There we go. Okay, let's move on. We have
article time.
Article time. This article is written by one of my favorite PT authors, of which I have many. This is written by Eric Houghton. And this article is a brief one called Considering Standards, and this was written in 1982. And I think Eric, I don't know if this is his last article that was published by him or not, because I think he died in 82 or 83. And every time I read his work, it's just, this was written in 82. I'm like, wow, this should be written right now in 2009.
Yes, it should be.
And we need more people talking about this and more people understanding what Eric is saying here. But in a nutshell, when this article, Considering Standards, what Houghton talks about is he's talking about performance standards. Mm-hmm. And performance standards, we use what I like here is he talks about what are standards in general. And we use standards in the world all the time. He talks about standards for, what's the normal body heat? We have a standard for that. What's the normal pulse? We have a standard for that. And we have, and those are health indicators. You can move beyond that and look at all types of standards, and those standards are very important because you can make judgments based on those standards. If you don't have those standards, how do you know what you're going at, what you're shooting for?
Right.
And what he's talking about here in considering standards is, hey, look, performance standards, these are very important in all professions. Medicine, building things, transportation, electronics, you name it. Mature disciplines have standards, and they use those standards. And we're interested in behavior, and of course, performance. If you talk about a behavior, if I do something, that is a performance. So a performance standard would be literally this behavioral standard, the standard of we want people to attain this frequency. And of course, performance standards, a synonymous word to a performance standard would be a fluency aim. So if we talk about fluency aims, we're also talking about performance standards. But in here, he basically talks about it's hard for people to deal with performance or to adopt standards, and he talks about that. So that's a quick synopsis of this article. What do you think about it, Doug?
Well, it hits kind of close to home. This isn't the first time I've read this article. I wish this article was written more recently. It's as important now as it was when it was written in '82. Some of the current situations that I deal with are the dilemma of choosing reading fluency aims. And I know that precision teachers have a range that they shoot for oral reading fluency. And many, as he mentions here, are based on many of the aims that people like to shoot for are those that are the norm rate. And the norm rate often falls well below, especially for younger children, falls well below the precision teaching standards. So just reading this and the example that he presents with typing, it's just amazing. I can't even, I don't want to go, I could talk for a while on this, and I don't want to get too far off the article itself, but it's just very frustrating because you get feedback in that, hey, why are you having these kids read to such high performance standards? Well, the reason is because special things happen when you get there. But it's hard to sell that idea, and he mentions it perfectly in this article of why it's so difficult to sell that idea.
Yeah. If you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to guess that you're interested in learning.
Right.
Precision teaching, that's what we're about. We're about learning. And of course, people use it beyond that. I mean, you can use the chart to monitor all types of different phenomena. But if you're a teacher or if you're psychology, or I'm going to guess that the majority of folks are really interested in how do we use this technology to enhance learning. And everything that you're saying, Doug, is right on the money. If you're a parent or if you're a teacher and you want to help your student with learning, and whatever that particular issue that you might be dealing with, let's say your student is struggling, if you have a true standard, right away you can compare that student's performance versus the standard. Let's say letter sounds. Letter sound fluency is 100 to 120 letter sounds per minute. If I have a student who comes in who can only identify 20 letter sounds, and let's say they have 5 errors during that 1 minute period, I can compare that against something it's golden to have that type of comparison.
Right.
And that's what you're doing with your research right now. you're interested in reading fluency, and what you're trying to do is tell people, hey, look, let's pay attention to these performance standards, because if we have them versus looking at the alternative is just taking a group of kids and saying, okay, let's just see what their average performance is. If we use that as our goal, what problems does that lead us to?
Well, it's the idea of we're going to slow down, and if you bring them up to a norm level, they only are going to go down from there. You don't see it's much easier to go with. I'm thinking of all reading fluency. It's easier to go slower than it is to go faster, and to maintain accuracy and rate. So it's just the idea of where do you want to get them to, and then what happens when they get there. And if you only get them to certain points, I know that your previous research shows that they don't have the same retention if they're brought to sort of a norm rate as compared to a performance standard of 200 words per minute, correct words per minute.
There's something in here that I highlighted, which is a quote that I just love this. He says, Eric Houghton says, skilled people are like a carefully woven, beautifully symbolic tapestry, a wrap and a woof of smoothly synthesized, fluent performances. I mean, isn't that the truth?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about us. If you think about performance and you're describing it that way, we have all of these interesting behaviors that are at different performance levels, and we really value certain performance, fluent performances in certain skills, and we marvel at some of these. I put up on my one website this guy who's juggling, and what's interesting about this guy juggling is, he's on TV. People are paying to see this wonderfully, fluent performance. And again, if we think about in education, if we want people to succeed as citizens, if we want them to prosper in whatever they're doing, we need to figure out one important thing. What are these performance standards for lots of critical skills that are going to help these people do well in their life?
Right. You want them to be fluent on the important skills.
Yes. You can't be fluent with everything, obviously.
No.
But if you look at experts in whatever fields they're in, there are certain things that they have to be fluent in. Otherwise, they're just not going to make it.
Well, they're also not called experts.
Good point, Doug. Very good point.
They're expert for a reason. And
yes.
Why wouldn't we want children to be experts at reading? Why wouldn't we want children to be expert at letter sounds? And so those sort of skills, you want to shoot for those expert levels. And when you're holding kids to a norm reference level, all you're bringing them to is average. And go ahead. I'll let you go. You were
I was going to say, I don't know how people can argue against what you're saying.
No.
But they do.
They do. Especially most of the children that Rick and I work with are special needs, and they're well below average. So bringing them up to average is something, but bringing them up to expert levels takes more, and it takes more work, but the payoff in the end is, well, and that's what we're working on showing, is better.
Yes.
And those of you who have brought children to expert levels, I'm sure would agree.
Yeah, and the other part, I guess, wrapping this up, is he gives an example of the QWERTY keyboard, and he talks about how in the 30s, Dvorak came up with his own keyboard, and that keyboard that he came up with was much more efficient than the QWERTY keyboard. And guess what one survives to today?
The QWERTY, and there's
exactly.
I have to share the original story because it's amazing. The old typewriters had those bars that would come up and smack, and if people typed too fast, they would get jammed. So they purposely made the QWERTY to slow people down. But we don't have that problem today, but yet it's still in front of us.
Yeah, and he uses some really good language here. He talks about, he says, so here's the enigma, which exemplifies some of our classic confused emotional reactions to the topics of standardization. And he goes on and talks about these problems that happens with standardization. And here's a case where we are stuck with this standardization that is, I think he uses the word retarding performance. Or what's he say? Retarded progressive desirable developments. And I think that's the other thing that we need to look at, that when you talk about performance standards, what we're saying is, hey, look, these numbers that we come with, they're these aims that we're shooting for. We're not saying that they have to be, once we figure out what a number is, that it's going to be that range forever, right? It could change.
Right.
And there's lots that goes with it. But this article, I think, is very important for people to read, so they really get the sense of how important performance standards are, how important it is for standardization. And again, this is one piece of precision teaching. Taking performance standards doesn't take anything away from acceleration analyses, from all the other wonderful things we can do on our standard acceleration chart. And it doesn't have to be, hey, look, if I'm using performance standards, I'm ignoring these other indicators that we have. But nevertheless, we need to embrace performance standards for what they are and use that information to help us make good decisions by whatever learners we're working with, whether that be children or adults.
Well said.
Thank you, Doug. Well, on that very nice comment, why don't we move on to our interview? I would like to welcome Kerri Milyko to the Precision Teaching Podcast. Kerri, welcome.
Thank you so much, Rick, and thank you so much for including me in this amazing lineup that you have going on here. It's quite an honor.
I'd like to start off all of my podcast interviews with asking, how did you get involved in precision teaching?
Well, I did my graduate coursework at University of Florida, and there, just majoring in psychology, and took Dr. Pennypacker's class, and there you go. There's the chart.
Oh, I didn't realize you were at UF.
Yep. That's he's my chart daddy. So through using the chart, I then I liked it. I loved everything about it. And that's pretty much how I was introduced to behavior analysis. And I was taking his class and Dr. Timothy Hackenberg's experimental analysis of behavior class. And took them simultaneously and loved the chart. And then when I applied to graduate school, which was quite soon after that, it was in the midst of that actually. They were using the chart out here at UNR, and I was like, oh, I know this. And so I came out here and refined my skills.
Now, who was out there using the chart?
Initially, it was Ted Boyce, but Ted Boyce actually started using it, I believe, through Kimberly Behrens, who's now one of my supervisors. Or she's more like my work supervisor and cultivating me in all things chart related. My graduate supervisor out here is Patrick Gezzi. But Kimberly got hooked on PT. I'm not sure what got her hooked on to begin with, but then she was like, I want to do this. And Ted Boyce was like, all right, let's do it. Let's, learn about it together. And so through that, they formed the Center for Advanced Learning when it was under the umbrella of the University of Nevada, Reno. And then Dr. Berenson privatized it. So yeah, it was Ted Boyce was the main faculty, but Kimberly brought the chart to Reno, I believe.
Okay. I've been really impressed with all of the chart folks out there, because I know Ted was out there, and he's no longer with the university, isn't that correct?
Right. He went to the private sector.
Yeah. And then of course, Kim, and then Nick is also, I think, fair to say he's a chart guy.
Yes, most definitely.
Yourself.
He did his dissertation with the chart, actually.
Oh, that's
I know.
Awesome.
It was a RFT study using the chart. So yeah, that was exciting.
It's also nice that the faculty out there are receptive and allow you to use the chart, because in my experience, that's not always the case.
And you're right, it isn't. You know, they see that funky blue chart with all those lines, and they, you know, there's a little squimmer in their seat, but, you know, the faculty out here are really great, and Dr. Gezi has been very welcoming with the chart. He's actually using it a bit in his autism services, and he's like, man, if I hear one more chart talk about how great the chart is and how bad percent correct is and what the blue lines mean and vertical ones and the horizontal ones, he's like, I'm just going to throw something at you. So I don't need to be beat down again. I know it. I could tell you the chart talk. So I mean, he's quite proficient at it too. So it's been great. There's about 5 of us who he adopted through his lab with the leaving of Ted Boyce that are using the chart. Mm-hmm. So it's great. I love it.
Now, you just, if I'm not mistaken, you just finished a pretty big study yourself, right?
About a year ago, I finished my master's thesis. Mm-hmm. And, I don't think it's big in the sense of, there was 5 participants and, we really, it was a basic design, but man, the results I think are powerful and big and have tons of implications. I'm trying to whittle down my thesis for publication right now, and that is just about the hardest task to do, because it's your baby, and you're like, oh man, but I want to talk about this. This point is fantastic, and this point is so powerful, and it's really hard to say these things in just a sentence or two. Mm-hmm. So, but yes, I did. It was about a year ago that I finished my master's thesis.
And tell me what you found in a nutshell.
I'm not good at that.
So I'm asking you to whittle it down verbally.
That's one thing I wasn't able to whittle down with my discussion. I looked at specifically, I was looking at random behavior. So seeing
random behavior.
Ran.
Ran. Oh, right. Rapid automatic naming.
And so I was looking, CSA letters, colors, pictures, categories, anything like that. And I was working with preschoolers, and the first thing I wanted to do was address that this type of behavior, coming from our perspective, I mean, it is a behavior. However, traditional education doesn't view it that way. They view it as some sort of immutable trait, like intelligence. So that was the first thing that I needed to address, which, for our world, no shocker, PT has been manipulating RAN-like behaviors for decades now. But traditional education uses RAN as an assessment tool because they don't think that it could be shaped. So anyway, so I did that first. But then the other thing is, I wanted to look at what has been talked about in the precision teaching community as the go fast operant. So if you build up high-paced, fluent responding on one particular skill, do we see emergence of that high-paced, rhythmic responding, fluent performance on other skills? And so I use very similar skills. That's why I chose RAN. And we saw, after training just one exemplar, we saw transference on 4 other RAN tasks. So we saw jump up in level, turn up in acceleration on probes. And they were evaluated weekly, 2 timings, once a week. And training was for the little ones on one particular exemplar at 15 seconds or 30 seconds, so just little itty bitty sprints. And we're just reinforcing increases of frequency. And we saw an effect across the board. So that was pretty cool. And
you saw that with the RAN, you got the one RAN behavior up to a certain frequency, and then you measured these other RAN behaviors that you didn't teach.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. So we reinforcement was a contingent upon increases of frequency and accuracy for one RAN skill, which was CSA colors. And then we evaluated 4 other RAN tasks like numbers, CSA letters, CSA categories, CSA directions. We evaluated those just through probing. We just had them engaged in a 30-second timing, and we did not deliver reinforcement based on increases of frequency or accuracy. We delivered reinforcement on, appropriate behavior, such as sitting in their seat nicely. I mean, we're dealing with preschoolers, so they're, all over the place, and just delivered reinforcement based on appropriate behaviors. And so we saw an effect, and it was pretty cool. And there was just additional things other than that were evaluated in the study, such as, for one kid, we didn't see an effect until training was at 30 seconds on the targeted task. When we had training at 15 seconds, we were shaping up endurance. We didn't see an effect on the probe skills, but it wasn't until we were training at 30 seconds, or it wasn't even 30 seconds, it was 20 seconds, because we had to shape it up. And it wasn't until training was at 20 seconds that we saw an effect on those untargeted novel tasks. And we saw that. I also looked at a practice condition. So instead of receiving reinforcement on increases in accuracy, he received reinforcement kind of non-contingently, or his behavior did. And then we saw that there was some effect. We saw a little bit of a turn-up in acceleration on the novel tasks. However, it wasn't as steep of a time acceleration as the experimental participants.
And how many? So you did this with 5 students?
Yes, I did. I had 3 experiments. Well, actually, no, it was 6. I had one guy who wasn't. Actually, we learned a lot from his case. We had. Hold on, let me rewind. So we had 4 experimental participants, 1 practice participant, and 1 who just received the probe skill. So he was kind of our control participant, who was just kind of the kid who we evaluated his behavior of a typical preschooler. And then we evaluated the practice kids, so a kid who received mass practice. And then we evaluated 4 kids who received a precision teaching intervention, specifically reinforcement contingent upon increases in accuracy and frequency specifically. But that one kid that I was telling you about, he kind of flaked with me with regards to attendance. And he had a little bit of behavior problems, so we didn't get these initial steep accelerations on the targeted task to begin with. But the cool thing about this is that it really allowed us to see that there seems to be a bit of correlation between the steepness of the initial training acceleration and acceleration on the probes. Because this kid, CS, so we can give him a name, he had a flat acceleration. It was like a times 1.4, something he's just inching on his training task. And we saw a similar it was a time acceleration, but not great on his probe skills. Now, for my other 3 experimental participants, their attendance was fantastic, and they were actually at another preschool, and they had, like times 2 accelerations across their training targets, and we saw similar accelerations on their probe skills. So there seemed to be a correlation with regards to the steepness, initial training acceleration, right from the base frequency up to where they get to that level where they're really kind of close to the aim, their performance starts flattening out. So that initial training acceleration seems to have a relationship with the steepness of the acceleration across the untargeted novel tasks.
I'm interested in how you interpret these results, because when you start off with RAN is it's a cognitive a process that people believe that what rapid automatic naming or rapid naming does is kids who have dyslexia, one of the issues is that they can't, so this is the theory, they can't process information, and so they use the RAN assessment to say, okay, if you're slow at RAN, you're having problems processing.
Right.
So do you interpret your information as, okay, we have increased the processing, therefore we're seeing this other processing increased likewise? Is that, or because earlier when you were talking about it, I can't remember what you called it.
A generalized operant?
No, when you said precision teachers call this something.
Oh, an immutable trait. Or, well, that traditional education views ran as like an organic immutable trait.
No, you said that precision teachers call it something when you get something fast and then the other thing.
Oh, the go fast operant.
The go fast operant.
The go fast operant.
Yeah,
I think. I think in a conversation that I had with Carl Binder, that's he was like, "Oh yeah, you're talking about the go fast operant." So.
Okay, so I'm just curious. How do you interpret what you found?
You could talk about it with regards to processing speed, but I guess being more behavior analytic, we don't kind of talk about processing speed that way. We use those words when just having this conversation with the lay community because, everyone's so cognitive out there. So when you talk to parents about processing speed, they know exactly what you're talking about. But
yes.
But when you talk about like a generalized operand, they're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. I understand. You're right on the money.
I like to talk about it as a generalized operand. I think that we selected a behavior that is a member of a greater class. And when reinforcement is contingent upon increases of frequency, we see increases of frequency of other members of this class. Dr. Pennypacker and I had this conversation at ABBA, and we're like, what is the operant? You can't, because, in this situation, we're calling RAND. The behavior itself is rapid automatic naming. However, this is future research by all means, but if we reinforce increases of frequency of saying math facts, and the kid now picks up his room more efficiently, there's a greater speed at that, or some other just random behavior, then how do we talk about the operant? And that one's still up for debate. I don't know. We didn't come to a conclusion on that one, but
sure.
But in my study, I really like to talk about it as, we selected one member of an operand class and we saw emergence. And that's what I think is really cool is that, I don't know if I want to, put on my big girl pants and say this, but, we may have found, just an operand class here that is really cool, that has just a huge opportunities for future research to look at. What are the limits of the boundaries of this operand? Is it within the same learning channel? Is it across learning channels? Is it across subject domains? Do we find it with regards to academic versus just home tasks? Or, the questions are kind of endless on that, but gotta start somewhere.
As a person who does research in reading, I'm very intrigued and very excited to hear about your research, because you oftentimes, whether you take a behavioral view, even if you take a direct instruction view or an explicit instruction view, if we are going to address behavior, you can address the behavior explicitly, or you can address the behavior indirectly. For example, in reading, if you teach someone letter sounds, that's a direct measure, versus, if you motivate them, that's an indirect measure, so to speak. Maybe the motivation helps them pay attention more, but the actual work on the letter sounds is a direct measure. And what I like about what you're talking about is here, if you look at the RAND concept and the way you're interpreting it, not only do you have a valid scientific way of studying this, but you can replicate this. And as you pointed out too, this actually gives us something to do. We could look at this and say, well, you know what? Here's the effects that it has later on for kids versus reading versus other people that just use RAND as a purely assessment-driven device. Right.
And, I like to do research that will, that is socially valid. And, the implications of my thesis is really, Even if you just have the kid math practice, you kind of get some behavior for free. And so there you're affecting these other behaviors indirectly by just targeting one behavior directly, which I think is kind of cool. Because, I mean, really, with precision teaching, I think we have the ability to make learning as efficient and effective as possible. And those are kind of like, I love talking about efficiency and effectiveness because I think that there's just too many great things to do in the world to spend so much time, 8 hours in school, and then they're not even getting all that they need there, so they come and see me for 2 hours a day. These poor kids. Mm-hmm. So I really would love to just transform the way that, I mean, granted, we all say this, transform the education system so that it's more efficient and effective, and that our kids can, have time to learn other languages or have time to spend in the arts and music and become well-rounded individuals. But I think that if you, in our lab, it's all about emergence. And if you can train one skill and get some others for free, I think that's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. And I agree. The efficiency and effectiveness, it's a big issue because you also look at these kids who, if you're I'm in special ed, so most of the students that I work with have had a long-standing problem with whatever the particular area that got them into special ed. And it's, right. You look at the feelings, the affect that these kids have, and you don't want to have something that's going to drag out for 2 or 3 months. If you can do something that helps with that efficiency, you also get that effective component. Not only that, but someone who, you can just do the math on a lot of these things. If it takes someone... someone reads at 80 words per minute and they have, they have to read 5,000 words. You can calculate basically how long it's going to take them. But if you can increase that skill to 100 or to 200, now you've greatly decreased that time. And as you point out, you can use that time for other more productive things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's something that you can talk about with parents with respect to homework, summer reading. Mm-hmm. We all got those books over the summer, 5 books you're supposed to read before class. And, that way you can be like, oh, okay, well, in summer, no, I don't want to sit and read books that I probably don't enjoy, because when you're in 8th grade, you don't want to read some of the books that they give you. But you want to go out and play football or play tennis or whatever it is, enjoy your summer. But, I think... that's what I tell parents, it's like, if they come here, granted, right now, your schedule is going to suffer. However, your schedule in the future and future years for your child, for your students, it will definitely free up the time, and they won't be going to bed at 10 because they're up late doing homework.
That is the exact message that I try to sell to teachers, because mm-hmm. The work that we do requires work, right? You have yes. students responding. You're giving up a little of the control to let the students do more things. You're recording behavior. You're making decisions. But all of that work so pays off on the back end, and that's a hard sell, because if you look at the educational system, people want results now, and they want something that's going to solve the problem within a week or so, not taking the long view and saying, okay, we're going to put in this time and we're going to keep building these skills up, and then in the future we're going to have on the backside a learner who's much more competent, much more agile, and better equipped to handle the situations that they're in.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And maybe that's the reason that they keep on changing their philosophy or the way that their curriculum that they're using. We have this thing out here called Everyday Math. Are you familiar with that?
That thing is everywhere.
Oh, man.
I'm very familiar with it, unfortunately.
And, what happened to just, all right, we're just going to do math facts, and this is how they're done. And you're not going to figure out how they're done. You're not going to figure out a new way how they're done. This is, 8 times 3. That's 24. Know it. Love it. Right. Use it.
It's funny that you say that. We have something that's even more lovely than investigations, which is called, I'm sorry, I just gave it away, which is more lovely than Everyday Math. It's called Investigations. And this program explicitly says at certain age levels that discourages the teachers from having the kids practice facts. And it's just, it's really steeped in discovery from the beginning to the end. Again, you don't want to get on your horse and say, oh, no discovery learning ever. But if your whole thing is based on these discovery principles, and when you do provide instruction, you teach these kids these clumsy algorithms, if at best, it's just terrible.
Yeah, and I think that it is the complete opposite of efficiency and effectiveness.
Right.
I don't know.
Now, so that was your master's degree, and
Yes.
you're working on your doctorate now.
Yes, sir, I am.
And you're in a psychology program? Is that the program you're having?
Yes. Specifically, we have a behavior analytic program out here at UNR. That is actually we just won an award that's going to be presented at us at ABA next year. I think about being just really badass behavior analytic program.
Wow.
I forget what this called. I think it's like this. I don't know, some SABA award, I believe.
Wow, that faculty out there is so prolific, and they do such great work. I mean, that doesn't surprise me, and I guess I'm surprised that you didn't receive that award sooner. That you're,
there's a lot of good programs out there, and I think, I don't know, it's just nice to have received it. Yeah, and the cool thing is that we have kind of a well-rounded faculty in the sense that we have somebody pretty much involved in kind of any aspect of behavior analysis, or at least open to it, so that, there's somebody out here for everyone, depending on what research you want to investigate.
What's the next thing that is calling you in terms of research?
Well, it's like I fell in love. Love at first sight. It is. I was a student who is not a student of Dr. Gezi, but a student of Dr. Alavocious, Joe Dagan. He, for doctoral students out here, we have some comprehensive exams, and one of them is an oral comprehensive exam, and he chose to speak about basic procedure of percentile schedules of reinforcement and shaping. And so the basic guy at UNR is Dr. Gezi. So Dr. Gezi was like, all right, Joe, you're going to do this? You're going to present in my lab. So Joe comes in, and he does this amazing talk about percentile schedules of reinforcement. And, at first I was like, what are you talking about? I'm so confused. And then it was just like, wow, this would be amazing with precision teaching. So right now I just love percentile schedules and precision teaching. And so my dissertation is going to look at the marriage of these two, of the schedule with precision teaching, and some fun little manipulations there. But I'm just so intrigued by it, because I think it allows us to make training a little bit more systematic with regards to providing reinforcement. And another thing that's why I fell in love with it is I hired a new girl around the same time that Joe gave his talk, and I gave her some feedback because she was giving some sympathy reinforcement. Oh, well, you didn't get your goal, but that was a good job. So, 5 points. 5 points in my world is a lot. 5 points is when they hit aim. So I'm like, oh, no, don't do that. It was nails on the chalkboard for me, because I'm like, guess what? You just reinforced right there. So if we can come up with like a nice systematic way to provide reinforcement, especially with these kids that has kind of variable responding around the aim, and that's not something that, you really want, I'm all for it. And it's really systematic. We're implementing it fully with one kid clinically, and this is a kid I posted on the list about him, and I tried, I think, everything in my goodie bag. And I got a pretty good goodie bag. And he, just nothing. It would work for a little bit, and then his frequency would flatline. work for a little bit, and then, you see that flat line again. Then his responding was so variable. And so when I heard about this percentile schedules, I implemented with him just kind of across the board, might as well. And I have not seen accelerations like this with this kid ever. And I've been working with him for 2 years straight. And it's exciting. I love it.
So what's it look like? Can you tell
me? Yeah. So we have, you look at a set of responses. It really, you kind of need a visual. I like a visual here, but let's just say, I'll kind of talk through a visual. You look like at past X amount of timings, and we'll go with 10 because 10 is a nice, pretty number. Okay. So we'll say the first timing there was a response of 10. The second timing, they engaged 9 responses. So anyways, we give a count to all these, and within precision teaching, we have timings and we have counts, so this really blends itself nicely. So we have timing number 1, 10, timing number 2, 9, timing number 3, 11, timing number 4, 13, and so forth. So we'll go 15, down to 14, down to 12, up to 16, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we need 2 more. Up to 17, and then back down to 16. Okay, so we have 10, 9, 11, 13, 15, 14, 12, 16, 17, and 16. These are our last 10 timings. Now, there's a pretty little formula here that lets you figure out when to deliver reinforcement. And it is 1 plus the number of observations, so in this case it's 10. So 1 plus 10 times, and that's sum, times 1 minus W, which is kind of the percentage of reinforcement. So the percentage of timings that would contact reinforcement. And this historically has been kind of pulled out of people's butts. They're like, I don't know what this is going to be. And a lot of research has used 50%. So that's what I used. And so that kind of gives us a value
of what?
Kind of like the 50% of timings he'll contact reinforcement.
Okay. So
we make that into a decimal, so 0.5. And so when you do the calculations here, you get 5.5, and that's what we call your K value. K lets you know when you rank all of those timings from least to greatest, it has to exceed this ordinal position. So it has to exceed the position of 5.5. So in other words, it has to come in 6th place. So if we ranked the timings that I just spit it off, 9 was our number 1 and our lowest, 10 would be number 2, 11 would be number 3, 12 would be number 4, and 13 would be number 5, 14 would be number 6. Now this new timing that's about to occur is going to have to supersede our 5th position and take the 6th position. So it will have to beat 13. So in order for this student to receive reinforcement, he will have to engage in 14 or more responses in that particular timing period. So they go on, they read their words, and let's say they read 15 words in 15 seconds, boom, deliver reinforcement. And then the one thing that hasn't been looked at is kind of like the magnitude of reinforcement, the manipulation of reinforcement with regards to magnitude. The percentage really hasn't been looked at that much. But also what definitely hasn't been looked at is these more or less streams of behavior. Right now, with the applied research that has been conducted with all 3 studies really that's out there has been looking at duration as opposed to more of these streams of behavior, which is how we like to talk about timing. So it just kind of gives you a nice little systematic way. Now for the next timing, our 10, since that was our first initial timing, that 10 is now, it has been booted out of our window. So now the first timing out of our 10 most recent timings would begin with the 9, and the 15 that the student just performed would be the most recent timing, so that would be not factored in. So now you would have to go back in and kind of rework the hierarchy of numbers from least to most, and then, reset your criterion. That would supersede the fifth position. This is really easy to do on the chart because you have those frequencies. And so you can, and for us at Cal, just for some sort of checks between instructors, we also write just the pure count above the frequency dot. And so not only can you look at the frequency dot with regards to its level, but you can also look at the count in our situation. And really, it takes about 10 seconds for us to determine the criterion for reinforcement.
So you're doing this on, you have to have X amount of trials first?
Well, and
or is this based on historic behavior? Because I'm guessing this is all about telling you this is when we're going to deliver reinforcement, when this particular type of behavior occurs, correct?
yes.
And,
However,
yeah, go ahead.
well, I mean, when I implemented it initially, it was with the pre-existing student. So there was past, behavior that occurred that I could, make an evaluation. With regards to research, you would look at, before you started your intervention, you would look at baseline. But also, we kind of did something when we implement a new timing length or a new level. He's reading a new level of words. We make sure that it's kind of like on 100%. Well, he has to be. It's kind of like a K of 9. So he would have to be pretty much all the responses that occurred beforehand. So if there was only one timing, that timing would receive reinforcement. So then the second timing, that second timing would have to beat the first timing. And the third timing would have to beat those 2 previous timings. And that's kind of what we do if there's no behavior that occurs beforehand for us to kind of establish our criterion. Until we have that set number, that M value, to really enter in our formula.
So if I'm not mistaken, what you could actually do with this is, couldn't you just figure out, okay, this formula is almost giving you this line, this acceleration line that says if your behavior is this or above, it meets reinforcement.
Yeah, totally. And it also allows for a degree of variability too, because, with some of our more difficult learners, they don't just have this beautiful, frequencies following along a projected acceleration. They, they're bouncy, they engage with behavior problems, and so then their frequencies suffer. And so it kind of gives us a little bit of a bracket to allow that we can see a little bit of noise on the chart. And then you can then fine-tune that to get a little bit more stability. So, I mean, it's really bringing the art out of shaping. We chastise traditional education because it's so artistic. But yet, what do we do in precision teaching? We shape high rhythmic responding. I mean, that's what we do. We're shapers. So how are we still artistic with the way that we go about doing it? This brings a little bit more science into our science, from my perspective.
No, I agree. We need to be science-based educators.
Most definitely.
And so this is really fascinating research, and it's really interesting hearing how you're doing this, and you're bringing this on the chart's telling you things, and this is going to be really cool once this is done. So let me ask you this next. After you do this, then I suppose that you said that's going to be your dissertation, probably.
Yes.
And then what's the future hold for you after that? Are you thinking about going into private practice? Will you look for a university position?
I really love the setup that Dr. Behrens has. I love the I can't neglect my kids. I love the private sector. I love working with the kids. I can't leave that. But I also love research, and still, I mean, gosh, our field has just so much left to investigate. And that's,
Yeah.
I just really, I
That's an
mean,
understatement, really.
I know, exactly. I mean, gosh, I was training some RAs, and I reread Binder's 1996 article in the Behavior Analyst, and I was just like, you know what? I have my pad of paper. I'm just going to write down some research ideas. I think I came up with over 50. And I was just like, gosh, this is ridiculous. From one article, I still, picked out all these things that we have left to investigate. But anyways, so I don't want to neglect that either. So, and I'm a Florida girl. I have to go back. I got to go back. This dry weather out here in the desert is just killing my complexion, my little porcelain skin. So anyways, I need some humidity. So I need to go back to Florida, and I would like to have, my own center, doing have a precision teaching center, and but still be affiliated with university. Not full time, because I don't know how you guys deal with the politics of the university setting, but dabble a little bit and supervise some graduate students if possible, or at least supervise the research and have my center be an area that they can conduct research and where I can employ graduate students. So I'm looking forward to that time in my life, believe me. It is my little carrot in front of the donkey, if you will.
That model that you talk about, we used to have here at Penn State. This was before my time, but we had an affiliation with some kind of learning center, and you don't see many institutions like that because A, you have to have money for it, or I mean, if you can have something that's making money and can sustain itself, you need someone to actually run that. Mm-hmm. And if a faculty doesn't have maybe some grant money for a buyout, then that's an added thing to do. And unless you're really dedicated, you might not see that. But yet, being affiliated with university gives you access not only to all the university resources, but parents and other things. I just think within our world, we're such a small community that we just need more people and people doing all kinds of things. We need incredible learning centers so we could keep showing people this is what we can produce. So whether you do research there or just purely for the applied part of our field and helping people, that's just so important. Mm-hmm. And of course, some of our folks are, like for example, Elizabeth Houghton. She's not going to go on forever doing what she's doing in Morningside. Right. Kent's been doing this for a very long time, and you wonder about those folks and how much longer they'll continue to do the things that they do.
Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully they found the fountain of youth and they won't leave us. But because they've been just amazing in our field and completely.
Whenever they talk about retirement, we'll start some kind of internet campaign and get everyone to sign it and say, "No, I'm sorry, you can't leave." I
know. I mean, but it's so cool to be a part. I guess, of my generation in the sense that, like, these, founding people are still around, I mean, Og left us a couple of years ago, but, when I entered the scene, he was still around. It was just really cool to, hear about his name, and you're like, what? He's still alive? And he's still providing, insight on research and all this. I mean, it's really cool to be a part of that. I mean, it's kind of like, what would it be like to be around when Skinner was here, and to be at ABA when Skinner was at ABA, and that's kind of how I felt with Og. But that's still how I feel about, I mean, you and Carl Binder and Ken Johnson, like, you guys are still these big figureheads in our field, and it's, it's really cool to be a part of. So.
Nice thing, though, about our field is, especially the research that you're doing, we just need more research, and it's, if you think about it, if you start doing the math and you look at how many university professors are out there who are doing precision teaching, and even if you don't have a university professor who's interested in precision teaching, how many would be like your professor letting you do
Dr.
research?
Kerri? Right.
Yes.
Oh, amen. Like, I completely agree. I think you can count maybe on one hand the number of professors who are, fluent with the chart and conducting research with the chart. But, there are some that are open to that, and I just, hope that they keep on growing in number. But we need to conduct research, and we need to publish, and that's another thing. We need to publish, and we're out there trying to, our little lab has just really taken an effort in regards now, we haven't published anything yet, but we're motivating ourselves to publish because, man, I'm tired of reinventing the wheel. I've had conversations with people about, we found this, and I found that about 10 years ago. Oh, okay, great. We didn't know because it's not published. And the only way for people to become chart savvy, or at least open to the chart, is, again, if they see in publications, these people that we can't reach, these people who are not going to attend precision teaching talks at ABBA. I would love, we try to disguise our talks sometimes so that we can get people who are not PTers. Because, we preach to the choir all the time. We want to motivate and inspire and transform others in the way that they're conducting research when they see the research that we're conducting with a chart. That's why we give our chart spiel every single ABBA, and why the chart's great, and why people should use it, and the cool things you can do with it. Because for that one, or hopefully more than one person who's in there who has no idea what the chart is, and they're like, wow, this is really cool. Time is a variable. You're right. And look at that. You can totally see the influence of time on the chart. And percent correct is not, the bee's knees, and frequency of responding is a dimension of behavior. And I should incorporate that into my research. And so that's why we really, I think, publishing and doing all that, because they're not going to attend our talks unless we disguise it in some way, which is what we attempt to do. We really try not to use PT in our titles. We talk about like standard measurement or emergence of generalized responding or something like that. But we're trying to recruit people in, bring them over to the bright side.
Well, once you start, this is what I like to think. In our field is supposed to respect science. And once you start generating data, and when you start having publications, for example, I have a few chapters that should be coming out pretty soon that are strictly on the chart and that show this is why you need to do it. The more we get that, the more people should start embracing this as this is how we should do it. Because when you think about the standard acceleration chart, you don't need a study to show that it's a superior tool for time series. It's just fact. It's factual. But yet people haven't embraced that, or they haven't wrapped their heads around that yet. So, and that's just one thing out of it's a big thing. We have the chart, and looking at behavior through the lens of the chart allows us to do so many things that we would otherwise just not be able to do. So I'm really very excited to hear that you're taking the opportunity to publish, and that's not easy work. That's hard work to publish. It's hard work to do research, period. You have to spend, and I don't think a lot of people really can appreciate that, just how much hard work it is. You have to plan your study, you have to run it, you have to keep calibrating it, there's just so much that's involved to get your study, and that doesn't guarantee that whatever your idea is going to work.
Correct.
But, there's I could get off on this. I should probably calm down.
Oh no, go
step
for
off
it.
of my pedestal
step
here.
back on. Don't you get off that soapbox.
But I wanted to ask you about the Center for Advanced Learning. Now, you said that was affiliated. Is it still affiliated with the university? So are there still other people?
There's an affiliation, but it's privatized. It was run under the umbrella of the university. We were at UNR, the Behavior and Analytic program at UNR is a self-capitalized model. So faculty go out and generate their own funding for their students. And they do this through countless contracts. And we have Dr. Gezi has a contract. He has his own early autism intervention program. But he also has contracts with the school district out here with regards to teacher training and the parks and rec centers, stuff like that. And so that's how they generate funding for their own students, so they can fund, so that we can pay for students' tuition and a stipend. But throughout this whole process, and it was kind of initiated with the departure of Dr. Boyce, is that Kimberly was, I don't know, just shy of running her dissertation. And she pretty much, she birthed Cal. And so when Ted was leaving, instead of having it go into another faculty member who really wasn't too knowledgeable with the chart, the Barons decided to privatize it. And as such, they still wanted to maintain a relationship with the university. And so Dr. Gezzi, who used to be Dr. Barron's thesis advisor, master's advisor, he agreed to be the liaison. And so through that, he supervises us who work out here at Cal, but he also has a contract with Cal. So it's like, benefits on both ends. And it's a nice little relationship because, us who are interested in behavioral education, standard measurement, are able to practice what we research and refine our skills. But at the same time, we're able to be a part of a lab and research and all that kind of good stuff with Dr. Gezzi. And although Dr. Behrens does have her own lab as well, but Dr. Gezzi is our primary advisor.
So other students, I guess my question was getting at, other students can have time in the lab to learn all the great things that you do there.
Totally. We have, Kimberly, are you talking about Kimberly's lab?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So we welcome people to come in our lab. We're like evangelists for the charts. we go knocking on doors trying to get people to use the chart. We welcome everyone from other labs to sit in, and some do on occasion. And usually there are people who maybe have a stipend placement at Cal, but are not in Dr. Gezzi's lab. But it doesn't matter, and pretty much a lot of the labs at UNR are kind of like that. Because it used to not be a mentorship model. It was just recently that UNR was changed to a mentorship model, so that they really encourage participation with multiple faculty members. And so that feeling is kind of still there. We work with other faculty members with regards to our comps. So yeah, everyone's welcome to join in. Even just regular staff, undergraduates, are recommended to come to lab and sit in on research so they actually know why they do what they do.
So I wonder if you have room for a 42-year-old guy who's really excited about moving out there, getting some heat, and getting some chart action.
Totally. Come on down.
All right. Well, we're approaching the end of our interview, and I wonder if there's anything I haven't asked you, or there's something else you'd like to talk about before we leave?
I don't know. I'm a little bit of a rambler. I'm not sure what I hit and what I missed. So, no, I don't know. Is there any other question that you would like to ask me?
Well, we covered a wide range of topics, and I'm always very curious about the research part, and I feel that I really now have a real good understanding of the things that you've done and the things that you're doing, and I'll be eager to see you publish those.
Thanks. So will a number of people who are on my case about publishing. But, I think that what I do want to do is encourage those other students who are in my position out there to publish as well. And, JPTC is such an amazing outlet for what we do. But, there's other charts or other journals out there who are chart friendly. And even if we use the computerized chart that Stu Harder created and we just we use the line free version, that one is just so pretty. for those people who do not like all those the little blue lines. And so I would imagine, even Java would accept a chart like that, maybe. Fingers crossed. But,
Yeah.
who knows? I think that I just really think that we need to get on the bandwagon. I know some people don't want to look at kind of the best practices of precision teaching, but gosh, I think that we need to. I think we need to figure out what works. And instead of just, throwing in the whole kitchen sink. So, so I just really want to encourage the other students who are in my position, at other universities to publish and just to continue with their research.
That is very good advice. The next time I'm presenting when we're together, I'm going to actually ask you to, I'm going to have you stand up and give that spiel again.
All right. Sounds good. Will do.
Kerri, I want to thank you for taking all of your time to speak with me. This was a very, very informative interview, and I am just really just so intrigued and impressed with all the things that you're doing. And I know certainly from once you get your degree, we're certainly going to hear a lot more things from you, especially look forward to all of the research that you're going to be publishing.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks again for having me on here. This has just been, I can't believe that it's been an hour. It went by so fast. But,
Yeah.
I think, I just really want to rock the boat with precision teaching. I don't know. There's so much that needs to be done. And it really, I'm just jazzed by it. I'm really excited by what is out there and what the future may hold. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Well, thank you for joining the Precision Teaching Podcast.
You're welcome.
Welcome back. That was another very good interview. And, well, I guess we have some closing comments. Any comments to close with, Doug?
I guess we'll close. No, I really can't think of anything witty, and it's the middle of the summer, so it's hot. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that wasn't witty at all, Doug.
I know.
But that's okay, because I don't have anything witty to say either. Okay, well, on behalf of Doug Klosowitz, I'm Rick Cabina, and I thank you for tuning in to the Precision Teaching Podcast.
Have a great day.
Stay classy, San Diego.